Good evening, night wanderers, and welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Here, true and forgotten stories step out of the shadows, told in a calm voice to help you relax, clear your mind, and slowly drift into sleep. Before we begin tonight's journey, tell me where you are listening from. Leave your city or country in the comments below. It is always wonderful to see how far these stories travel through the night. You may hear a few short ads near the beginning of the video. After that, there will be no more interruptions, only the quiet darkness, the gentle sound of my voice, and the strange stories waiting ahead. So, lower the lights, get comfortable, and allow the world around you to slowly disappear. And if you enjoy peaceful nights filled with true fear, mystery, and unexplained events, please like the video, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness, and turn on notifications. Now close your eyes, take a slow breath, and listen carefully. Tonight, the darkness has something to tell you. This did not happen to me personally, but it happened to a friend of mine after she moved to London for university. She had bought a small one-bedroom flat in a block of apartments in the city. It was the first time she had lived completely on her own, and at the beginning, she was excited about it. The flat was not large, but it was enough for one person. It had a bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. She had arranged the place exactly the way she wanted. She put cushions on the sofa, left magazines on the coffee table, and slowly began making it feel like her own home. Moving to London was a major change. She was starting university, learning a new area, meeting classmates, and getting used to city life. Everything felt unfamiliar, but also exciting. The flat gave her a private place where she could return after classes and relax. For the first few nights, nothing unusual happened. She went to bed, slept normally, and woke up in the morning ready for the day. She locked the front door every night and checked the windows before sleeping. Living alone in a city made her careful, but she did not feel especially unsafe. Then she began noticing small things. One morning, she found cushions on the floor that had been on the sofa the night before. At first, she did not think much about it. She may have assumed they had fallen on their own, or that she had moved them and forgotten. A cushion slipping from a sofa was not impossible. Another morning, she noticed that some magazines were not where she remembered leaving them. Again, it was not enough to prove anything. People misremember small details all the time. She was busy with university and adjusting to a new routine. She may have picked up a magazine, moved it somewhere else, and forgotten. Still, the changes made her uncomfortable. The cushions did not seem to be falling in a natural way. The magazines looked as though someone had handled them. She began paying closer attention before going to bed. She would arrange the cushions neatly and notice exactly where the magazines were placed. She checked the windows and made sure they were closed. Most importantly, she locked the front door. She knew she locked it. That was why the situation did not make sense. If someone had entered the flat, how had they gotten inside? The windows were closed and the door was locked. There were other flats in the building, and anyone breaking in by force would probably make noise or leave damage. There were no broken locks, damaged frames, or signs that someone had forced a window open. Nothing valuable went missing. That made the small changes feel even stranger. A normal burglar would take something. They might steal money, electronics, jewelry, or anything easy to carry. Who would enter a flat only to move cushions or read magazines? She tried to ignore it. She told herself she was tired and overthinking things. Moving to a new city can make normal sounds and small changes seem more suspicious. Old buildings make noises. Pipes move, floors creak, neighbors can be heard through walls. Perhaps the cushions really had fallen. Perhaps she had moved the magazines without remembering. She did not want to frighten herself over something with a harmless explanation. For a while, she continued living normally. Then one night, she woke up and saw someone standing inside her bedroom. Even years later, she could not remember exactly what caused her to wake. Maybe there was a noise. Perhaps the mattress moved slightly, or her body sensed that someone else was in the room. Sometimes people wake suddenly without knowing why. She opened her eyes and saw a figure standing there. At first, she may not have fully understood what she was looking at. The room was dark, and she had just been asleep. Her mind needed a moment to separate dream from reality. Then she realized it was a person. Someone was standing in her bedroom, watching her. She screamed. The figure immediately ran. Everything happened very quickly. She did not get a clear look at the person's face or clothing. She only saw enough to know that someone had been inside the room. Her scream was so loud that a neighbor in the next flat woke up and came over to see whether she was all right. By the time the neighbor arrived, the person was gone. My friend was terrified. She had just woken to find a stranger standing near her bed. She did not know whether the person was still somewhere inside the flat or whether they had escaped. The neighbor helped her call the police. Officers arrived and searched the property. They checked the bedroom, living room, kitchen, bathroom, cupboards, and any place where someone might hide. They looked for signs of forced entry and searched for anything missing. They found no one. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. There was no broken window, damaged lock, or obvious evidence showing how a person had entered or left. Because there was so little physical evidence, the police considered other explanations. They suggested she may have been dreaming. They also mentioned sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis can make someone feel awake while still partly trapped in a dream state. People sometimes see figures in the room, feel watched, or believe someone is standing near the bed. The experience can feel completely real. From the officer's point of view, that may have seemed possible. A frightened student living alone had woken in the dark, seen a shadowy person, and screamed. There was no intruder inside when police arrived and no sign of a break-in. But my friend was sure she had seen someone. She did not feel as though she had dreamed it. She had watched the figure move and run away after she screamed. There was also another detail. The front door was unlocked. She was certain she had locked it before going to bed. That detail made the dream explanation difficult for her to accept. A dream could explain seeing a figure, but it could not unlock the door. The unlocked door also suggested that whoever had entered may have used it to escape. She told the police she always checked the lock at night. Living alone had made that part of her routine. The officers recorded the complaint, but without more evidence, there was little they could do. They did not know who the person was or whether there had truly been someone inside. After the police left, my friend no longer felt safe in the flat. The place that had been her new home now felt exposed. Every room seemed different. The living room was no longer only where she sat and studied. It was where someone may have moved her cushions and read her magazines. The bedroom was no longer private. A stranger had stood there while she slept. She wanted to leave London and move back home. Starting university no longer seemed exciting enough to make staying alone feel worthwhile. Her landlord was contacted and agreed to change the locks. An alarm system was also installed in the property. Changing the locks gave her some comfort because she believed that even if someone had somehow gotten a key, that key would no longer work. The alarm added another layer of protection. She also asked a few classmates to stay with her during the nights after the incident. Having other people there helped. The flat felt less dangerous when she was not alone. She could sleep knowing that someone else might hear movement or notice if a door opened. Her friends probably tried to reassure her. They may have repeated the police explanation that it could have been a dream. Perhaps stress, poor sleep, and moving to a new place had created a frightening image. She wanted to believe that. The alternative was much worse. If the figure had been real, someone had entered without damaging the lock, stood inside her bedroom, and escaped before the neighbor arrived. That meant the person might know the building well. It also meant they could possibly return. Days passed. Then, weeks passed. Nothing else happened. The new locks remained secure. The alarm did not activate. The cushions stayed where she left them, and the magazines did not move. Slowly, she began to relax. She may not have felt completely safe, but the silence made the dream explanation seem more possible. Perhaps the strange changes had been nothing. Maybe the unlocked door had been her mistake. She could have forgotten to turn the lock that one night. The figure may have been part of a nightmare. People want normal explanations because normal explanations allow life to continue. She returned to classes and tried to rebuild her routine. Then, several weeks after the bedroom incident, there was a knock at her door. When she answered, police officers were standing outside. They asked to come in and speak with her. This time, they were not there because she had reported another problem. They had come because they had discovered what had really been happening. The officers told her that they had carried out an early morning raid at the home of a man who lived a few streets away. The raid may have been connected to another investigation. She was never completely sure about every detail. Police searched the man's property and seized his electronic devices. On those devices, they found photographs and videos of my friend sleeping. There were many of them. The images had apparently been recorded using a camera with night vision capability. That meant the person could film inside a dark bedroom without turning on a light. The discovery confirmed that the figure she saw had been real. She had not been dreaming. She had not experienced sleep paralysis. A man had entered her flat repeatedly while she slept and taken photographs and videos of her without her knowledge. The police showed or described enough evidence for her to understand the scale of it. This was not one accidental visit. The collection contained footage from different nights. He had been inside her home more than once. Each video or photograph represented another time he had crossed the locked door, walked through her living space, and entered her bedroom while she was unconscious. The thought was almost impossible for her to process. A person can accept one frightening incident more easily than many hidden ones. The figure she saw was only the one time she happened to wake up. How many other nights had he stood beside her bed without being noticed? How close had he come? How long had he stayed? Did he ever touch anything near her? Did he stand over her face? Did he watch her breathing? The evidence could answer some questions, but it also created many more. The man quickly admitted that the person in the photographs and videos was my friend. He also gave the police the address. When investigators checked the address, they connected it to her earlier report about the intruder. The truth about how he entered was simple and frightening. He was a former tenant of the same flat. He had lived there before my friend. When he moved out or was evicted, he returned the original key to the landlord as required. But before returning it, he had made a copy. The landlord changed tenants, but did not change the locks. That meant the old key still opened the door. My friend had been locking the flat every night exactly as she claimed. The man did not need to break in. He simply inserted his copied key and unlocked the door. After entering, he could lock or close it behind him, move through the flat quietly, and leave when he was finished. On the night she woke up, he had probably unlocked the door, entered as usual, and gone into the bedroom. When she screamed, he ran back through the flat and escaped through the front entrance, leaving it unlocked behind him. That explained the lack of forced entry. It explained the unlocked door. It explained why nothing had been stolen. He had not been entering to rob her, he had been entering to watch her. The man told police that he would come into the flat at night and stand or sit while she slept. He took photographs and videos. Sometimes he sat on her sofa and read her magazines. That detail explained the cushions on the floor and the magazines being moved. The tiny changes she had noticed were evidence of a stranger making himself comfortable inside her home. While she slept only a short distance away, he sat in her living room as though the flat still belonged to him. He may have placed the cushions differently or dropped them while getting up. He read her magazines and failed to return them to the exact position where she had left them. Those changes had been small enough to make her doubt herself. He probably relied on that. If nothing valuable was taken and no damage was caused, she would have no clear reason to call police. She might blame tiredness or forgetfulness. The man had chosen a form of intrusion designed to remain hidden. He could enter, watch, film, and leave without creating the signs people normally associate with a break-in. The most disturbing part is that he knew the flat well. As a previous tenant, he knew the layout. He knew where the bedroom was. He knew which floorboards might make noise. He may have known how the doors sounded and where someone could stand without being noticed. He also knew the building and the surrounding streets. Living only a few streets away made it easy for him to walk to the property at night without drawing much attention. He did not need to park a suspicious car outside. He could wait until the building became quiet, enter with the copied key, and return home before morning. The police also told her that the man was already known to them for voyeurism-related offenses. There were reportedly other offenses as well, although my friend never learned or clearly remembered what all of them were. That meant she may not have been the first person he had watched or recorded. The copied key and hidden visits may have been part of an established pattern. He understood how to enter private spaces and remain unnoticed. The fact that he was already known to police made the discovery even more disturbing. This was not simply a former tenant who became confused and returned to an old home. He had deliberately kept a key and used it to enter after a new young woman moved in. He brought night vision recording equipment. He collected footage. Those actions required planning. He had to choose when to visit, carry the camera, enter quietly, and store the images afterward. He may have watched the flat from outside to learn her schedule. He may have known when she went to bed and whether she had visitors. The police raid may have prevented the behavior from becoming even worse. My friend could not know what he might have done if she had continued living there without waking up, or if the authorities had never searched his devices. The fact that he claimed he only watched her sleep did not make the situation harmless. A stranger secretly entering someone's bedroom is already a serious violation. The person sleeping has no way to protect themselves. They cannot know whether the intruder will remain at a distance or move closer. Even if he never physically harmed her, he took away her privacy and sense of safety. He turned sleep into a period when she was completely exposed. The place where she should have been safest became the place where she was most vulnerable. After the police explained everything, earlier moments changed meaning. The morning she found cushions on the floor was no longer a harmless mystery. He had been there. The magazines had moved because he had read them. The bedroom figure was not a dream. The front door was unlocked because he had run out. Each memory became more frightening once she understood the truth. She began wondering whether there were other signs she had missed. Had she ever noticed a strange smell? Had the bedroom door been in a different position? Did she wake with the feeling that someone had been nearby? Was there ever a quiet sound during the night that she ignored? She could not know which moments were real warnings and which were normal parts of life. The man was eventually detained under the Mental Health Act and placed in a secure hospital. My friend was told that his mental condition required treatment in a controlled facility. She understood that someone could be mentally unwell and still cause serious harm. Being placed in a secure hospital meant he was not free to return to the flat, but that did not immediately make her feel safe. The locks had already been changed, and an alarm had been installed. Logically, she knew his copied key no longer worked. She also knew police had his devices and knew exactly what he had done. But fear does not disappear simply because the danger is removed. The experience destroyed her ability to trust locked doors. Before this happened, locking a door meant safety. Afterward, a locked door only meant she hoped nobody had another key. She had trouble sleeping. Closing her eyes became difficult because sleep was when the man had entered. She might hear a small noise and immediately sit up, certain someone was in the room. Shadows looked like figures. The sound of neighbors moving through the building could make her heart race. Even when friends stayed over, she may have remained awake longer than everyone else, listening for the front door. The bedroom no longer felt peaceful. It held the memory of opening her eyes and seeing someone standing there. The knowledge that there were photographs and videos made the trauma worse. A memory can sometimes be questioned or softened over time. The footage proved that the intrusions happened. Somewhere, there had been images of her asleep and unaware. She may have wondered what she looked like in them and how close the camera was. She may also have worried that copies existed somewhere beyond the devices police seized. Had he shared them? Uploaded them? Sent them to someone? The police may have found no evidence of that, but the question could remain. Digital images can be copied easily. Once created, they are difficult to completely erase. The violation did not end when he left the flat. It continued in the knowledge that he had recorded private moments she never agreed to share. Last I heard, she still struggled with the effects. She eventually got a dog. The dog gave her both company and protection. An animal may notice sounds before a sleeping person does. If anyone tried to enter, the dog could bark and wake her. Knowing another living creature was in the home helped her feel less alone. She also had her locks changed regularly. To most people, changing locks again and again might seem unnecessary. To her, it provided temporary comfort. She had learned that a key could be copied without the owner knowing. Every time she received a new lock, she could tell herself that fewer people had access. But after what happened, complete certainty was difficult. She placed cups or other objects on door handles so they would fall and make noise if the door moved during the night. It was a simple alarm system. If someone opened the door, the cups would crash to the floor and wake her. She also installed sensor alarms throughout her home. Some detected doors opening, others reacted to movement. Her living space became filled with layers of security. Locks, alarms, sensors, objects placed near handles. A dog. These things helped her sleep, but they also showed how deeply the intrusion had changed her. Before London, she probably entered a room and saw only furniture. Afterward, she saw possible entrances and hiding places. She checked whether windows were fully closed. She examined locks. She listened for footsteps. She noticed whether objects had moved. The habits became part of her normal life. People sometimes use the word paranoia when someone becomes extremely careful. But her fear did not come from imagination. The thing she feared had already happened. A man had entered her locked home repeatedly. He had stood inside her bedroom. He had filmed her sleeping. Her precautions were connected to a real experience. Still, living in constant fear can become its own form of imprisonment. The intruder was in a secure hospital, but part of him remained in the way she lived. He affected how she slept, where she placed objects, and how often she changed locks. He had taken more than photographs. He had taken the simple belief that home was private. The landlord's decision to change the locks only after the incident also raised serious questions. Whenever a tenant leaves a property, especially after an eviction, changing the locks is one of the clearest ways to protect the next person. Keys can be copied easily. Returning one original key does not prove no copy exists. My friend had no way to know a previous tenant still had access. She paid for and lived in a flat she believed only she and the landlord could enter. The failure to replace the lock allowed the old tenant to continue treating the property as his own. The landlord may not have known the man was dangerous, but the result showed why changing locks between tenants matters. A cheap and simple security step might have prevented the entire situation. If the lock had been replaced before my friend moved in, the copied key would have been useless. The man would have needed to break in, make noise, damage the door, or abandon the plan. Instead, he entered quietly and repeatedly, because the old key still worked. The case also showed how easy it is for real experiences to be dismissed as dreams when there is no immediate evidence. The police were not unreasonable to consider sleep paralysis. People do experience it, and shadowy figures in bedrooms are common during those episodes. But my friend knew what she had seen. She also knew the door was unlocked. For weeks, she had to live with people suggesting her own mind may have created the event. Then, police found the videos and proved she had been right. That confirmation must have created mixed feelings. Part of her may have felt relief because she was not imagining things. She had not forgotten to lock the door. She had not invented the figure. But proving she was right also meant accepting the much more frightening truth. Someone had really been there. Sometimes a harmless explanation is easier to live with, even when it makes you question yourself. The truth gave her validation, but it also gave her permanent fear. I think about the neighbor who heard her scream. If that person had not come over, she would have been alone immediately after the intruder escaped. The neighbor's presence may have prevented the man from returning that night or hiding nearby. It also gave the police another person who could confirm how frightened she was and when the event occurred. The neighbor did not see the intruder, but responding quickly mattered. In apartment buildings, people often ignore sounds from nearby homes because they do not want to interfere. That neighbor heard a scream and chose to check. It was the right decision. I also wonder what the man did after he ran from the flat. He may have walked calmly back to his own home only a few streets away. He probably knew she could not identify him clearly. There was no forced entry linking him to the property. He may have believed police would accept the sleep paralysis explanation. For several weeks, it appeared he had escaped without consequences. The locks were changed, preventing him from entering again, but he still had the images and videos. He may have continued watching them. Then police raided his home for reasons he had not expected and discovered the collection. His own devices connected him to the crime. Without those files, my friend may never have known the truth. She might have spent her life wondering whether the person in the bedroom was real. The moved cushions and magazines could have remained unexplained. Instead, the evidence answered the central question while creating a much darker picture. He had not entered only once. He had made her home part of his private routine. He unlocked the door, sat on her sofa, read her things, walked into her bedroom, and watched her sleep. That level of comfort is one of the most disturbing details. He behaved as though he had a right to be there. Perhaps because he had once lived in the flat, part of him still saw it as his space. But the home belonged to my friend now. Her belongings were inside. Her private life was there. He knew that and entered anyway. The old tenancy gave him knowledge and a copied key, not permission. His behavior was not only voyeurism from a distance. He crossed the physical boundary into her home. He placed himself close enough that she could have woken and touched him. The night she did wake, he stood in the bedroom instead of immediately leaving. Perhaps he believed she was still asleep. Maybe he was watching through the camera and did not notice her eyes opening. When she screamed, he finally reacted and ran. That moment may have saved her from further visits. The scream brought a neighbor. The police report created a record. The locks were changed. When the raid happened weeks later, investigators could connect the evidence to an existing complaint. Without that report, they may still have identified her from the address he gave, but the earlier incident strengthened the connection. My friend's decision to call police mattered, even though the officers found nothing that night. People sometimes decide not to report an event because they think there is not enough evidence. This story shows why making a report can still be important. The information may connect with evidence discovered later. A strange person, an unlocked door, or a repeated disturbance can become part of a larger pattern. The first report may seem unsolved, but it creates a starting point. For my friend, the case eventually had an answer. Many people who feel watched or find objects moved never receive one. An answer is not the same as peace. Knowing who entered did not restore her sleep. Knowing he was detained did not erase the footage. Knowing the locks were changed did not rebuild trust. Recovery from this kind of event is not simple. The physical home can be secured in one day. The mind may take years. She had to teach herself that each new house was not the old flat. A noise did not always mean someone had entered. A moved object did not always mean a stranger had touched it. A shadow in the bedroom was sometimes only furniture. But because her first doubts had been correct, dismissing later fears became difficult. When she noticed something unusual, she could not easily say, "I am imagining it." That was exactly what people had said before the police found the videos. Her caution became a way of trusting herself. The dog, sensors, changed locks, and cups on handles all provided evidence. If the alarms remained silent, she could tell herself nobody had entered. If the cups were still in place, the door had not opened. These systems helped replace the feeling of certainty that the original lock had failed to provide. The story still frightens me because it does not involve a stranger breaking a window or forcing a door. It involves someone entering quietly with a key. There was no crash to wake her. No alarm went off. He could move through the flat as though he belonged there. Most of us lock the door at night and believe the danger remains outside. My friend locked hers too. The danger carried a copy of the key. She moved to London to begin university and live independently. She bought a one-bedroom flat and slowly made it her home. Then cushions began appearing on the floor. Magazines moved. She told herself there had to be an ordinary explanation. One night she opened her eyes and saw a person standing in her bedroom. She screamed, and the figure ran. The police searched the flat and found nothing. Because there was no forced entry and nothing was stolen, they suggested a dream or sleep paralysis. But the front door was unlocked, even though she knew she had locked it. The landlord changed the locks, an alarm was installed, and friends stayed with her. For several weeks, nothing else happened. Then, police raided the home of a man living nearby. On his devices, they found photographs and night vision videos of her sleeping. He had been a previous tenant of her flat. Before returning the original key, he had made a copy. He entered at night, watched her sleep, recorded her, sat on her sofa, and read her magazines. The cushions and magazines had moved because he had been using them. The figure in the bedroom was real. He was reportedly already known to police for voyeurism and other offenses. He was eventually detained under the Mental Health Act and placed in a secure hospital. My friend survived without being physically attacked, but the experience changed her permanently. She struggled to sleep. She got a dog. She changed locks repeatedly. She placed cups on door handles and installed movement sensors throughout her home. The man may no longer be free to enter her house, but he left her with the knowledge that a locked door can still open and that someone can stand beside you while you sleep without you ever knowing. The most frightening part is not the night she woke up. It is all the nights when she did not. I delivered pizzas for a short period because I thought it might be a fun job. At first it seemed simple enough. I would spend most of the shift driving around, listening to music, dropping off food, and collecting tips. I liked the idea of being out of the store instead of standing in one place all night. I assumed the worst parts would be bad weather, rude customers, confusing addresses, or people who refused to tip. I did not expect one delivery to leave me wondering whether I had narrowly escaped something much worse. Most of the orders were in areas close to the restaurant. Even when I did not know the street, I usually recognized the general neighborhood. I could find the house, hand over the pizza, and return to the store without much trouble. Then one night I received an order that was much farther away than usual. When I looked at the address, I barely recognized the area. It was so far out in the middle of nowhere that I did not even know our restaurant delivered there. The drive was going to take around 50 minutes. That alone seemed strange. A delivery that far away would take almost 2 hours once I drove there, completed the order, and returned to the restaurant. It did not seem worth it for one pizza, but the order had been accepted, and I had been told to deliver it. So I took the food, entered the address, and started driving. The farther I traveled, the more isolated the area became. The busy roads slowly turned into quieter streets, and then those streets became narrow rural roads, surrounded by open land, trees, and darkness. There were fewer houses and almost no businesses. Streetlights became rare. In some places, the only light came from my headlights. I kept checking the directions because I thought I might have entered the address incorrectly. Every time I checked, the map told me to continue farther. I joked to myself that I was driving deep into the middle of nowhere. It felt like the kind of place people describe with rude expressions, because there is no polite way to explain how far it is from everything. At first, I was more annoyed than frightened. A 50-minute drive for one delivery meant I was missing other orders and possibly losing tips. I also knew the pizza would not be as hot by the time I arrived, and customers sometimes blamed drivers for delays, even when the distance was the real problem. Still, I continued. The roads became darker, and the houses were spread farther apart. Some properties had long driveways that disappeared between trees. Others looked old and badly maintained. I tried not to judge people based on their houses. I had grown up in an old home that looked creepy from the outside, especially at night. People could have easily looked at it and imagined something terrible happening inside, even though it had simply been an older house. Because of that, I usually did not assume a strange-looking property meant the person living there was dangerous. When I finally reached the address, I saw an old house that fit the area perfectly. It looked isolated and worn. There were not many nearby neighbors, and the darkness made the property seem more unsettling than it probably looked during the day. The house did not immediately terrify me, but it made me more alert. I parked and checked the address again to make sure I was in the right place. The order was correct. I picked up the pizza and walked toward the entrance. I remember thinking about how far away the restaurant was. If there was a problem with the order, I could not simply go back and replace something quickly. If my car stopped working, I would be stuck a long distance from anyone I knew. Still, it was only a pizza delivery. I approached the door and knocked. An older man answered. He looked as though he was probably in his 60s or 70s. He was using a walker and moved slowly. Seeing the walker immediately lowered my guard. He appeared physically weak and harmless. He was an elderly customer who had ordered food because leaving the house may have been difficult for him. He asked whether I could bring the pizza inside and place it on the table. My first thought was that I did not get paid enough to enter customers' homes. Drivers are usually expected to remain at the door. Going inside is risky because once the door closes, nobody outside can see what is happening. But he was old and using a walker. I did not want to be rude or make him struggle to carry the pizza while also trying to support himself. I told myself I would only be inside for a few seconds. I would walk to the table, place the box down, collect the payment if necessary, and leave. So I stepped inside. As soon as I entered, he closed the door behind me. Then I heard the lock. That sound changed the entire feeling of the situation. A door closing is normal. A door locking after a delivery driver enters is not. I noticed it immediately, but I pretended I had not. I did not turn around or ask him why he had locked the door. I did not want him to know that I was already nervous. If his intentions were harmless, reacting strongly could create an unnecessary argument. If his intentions were not harmless, showing fear might tell him he had control. So I kept moving as though everything was normal. I carried the pizza toward the kitchen. The house felt even more isolated from the inside. I was nearly an hour away from the restaurant, standing in a stranger's home with the front door locked behind me. Nobody from work was close enough to help quickly. I did not know whether anyone had written down the exact address or noticed how long I had been gone. They knew where the delivery was supposed to go, but I could not assume they would become worried immediately if I was late. Delivery drivers can be delayed by traffic, customers, or confusing roads. I continued into the kitchen and placed the pizza on the table. I expected the man to follow slowly because of the walker. Instead, he positioned himself in the doorway. He was standing between me and the way back toward the entrance. The walker made him look less dangerous, but the doorway was narrow enough that he did not need to be especially strong to block it. Then he asked whether I wanted to party with him. The word was vague, but the meaning felt wrong immediately. This was not a normal invitation to stay for a slice of pizza or have a drink. The way he said it, the locked door, the isolated house, and the fact that he was blocking the doorway all made the situation feel threatening. I did not know exactly what he expected. I did not want to find out. My mind began working very quickly. I needed to leave without making him angry. Telling him no directly might have caused him to continue blocking the doorway. He could have tried to grab me, threaten me, or call for someone else who was hidden in the house. I did not know whether he was truly alone. The walker might have been real, or it might have been used to make visitors feel safe. Even if he was physically limited, I had no idea whether he had a weapon nearby. We were far from other houses, and nobody would hear me clearly if I shouted. I needed him to open the door willingly. Fortunately, lying came naturally to me when I was under pressure. I did not pause long enough for him to become suspicious. I smiled or acted as though his invitation did not bother me, and told him I would love to stay. Then I added that I could not stay at that moment because my delivery car had a security timer. I told him that whenever I left the vehicle during a delivery, a 2.5-minute timer began. If I was not back inside the car and driving before the timer ended, the system would automatically contact the police and send them my exact location. I also told him the alarm could not be canceled manually. According to my story, it would only shut off when the car returned to the restaurant's property. None of that was true. There was no timer. The car was not automatically connected to the police. Nobody at the restaurant had a special system tracking whether I returned within 2.5 minutes. But I said it with as much confidence as I could. I needed him to believe that keeping me inside would bring police directly to his house. The change in him was immediate. Only moments earlier, he had needed the walker to move. After hearing about the supposed timer, he left the walker exactly where it was and moved quickly toward the front door. He did not slowly guide himself with careful steps. He fast-walked. That detail confirmed that my fear had not been unreasonable. The weak old man, who needed help carrying a pizza, suddenly moved much faster when he believed the police were about to receive his location. He reached the door, unlocked it, and opened it for me. I did not question the change in his movement. I did not say anything about the walker. I simply continued acting as though everything was normal. I probably said I would come back another time, or repeated that I needed to reset the imaginary timer. Then I stepped outside. The moment I crossed the doorway, I wanted to run, but I did not know how he would react if I suddenly sprinted to the car. I tried to move quickly without looking panicked. I kept expecting him to grab me from behind or close the door before I fully escaped. I reached my vehicle, got inside, and locked the doors. Only then did I begin to understand how frightened I was. My hands were shaking, my heart was beating hard, and my breathing felt too fast. I started the car and pulled away from the house as quickly as I could without losing control on the dark road. I watched the mirrors. I did not know whether another vehicle might follow me. I had no proof that the man intended to hurt me. It was possible he was only lonely, socially inappropriate, or trying to make a strange joke, but the locked door, the blocked doorway, and his sudden ability to move without the walker made the situation feel much more serious. If he had only wanted company, he could have asked while leaving the door unlocked. He could have accepted a refusal. He would not have needed to stand between me and the exit. Most importantly, he would not have rushed to release me the moment he believed police were being called. His reaction suggested he knew his behavior would look wrong to law enforcement. During the drive back, I replayed every part of the delivery. I thought about the 50-minute journey into an isolated area. I thought about the old house and how I had convinced myself not to judge it. I remembered seeing the walker and assuming the man could not be dangerous. I remembered deciding to enter because I felt sorry for him. Then I heard the door locking again in my mind. That small sound was the point when the delivery stopped being normal. I wondered what would have happened if I had not invented the timer. Would he have allowed me to leave after I refused his invitation? Would he have tried to block me? Was there someone else in the house? Did he have a weapon? Had he done the same thing to another delivery driver? I had no answers. The unknown possibilities were what made it so disturbing. The man had chosen to order from a restaurant nearly an hour away. There may have been closer places, although I cannot be certain. Perhaps he knew that a driver from far away would be isolated and less familiar with the area. Maybe he requested delivery because he genuinely had trouble leaving the house. But once I saw him move quickly without the walker, I questioned how much help he really needed. The walker may still have been necessary most of the time. Fear can make people move faster than expected, even with physical problems. Still, seeing him abandon it so easily made me feel manipulated. He had used age and weakness to make entering the house seem safe. Whether that was planned or not, it worked. I had ignored my normal rule because I thought an old man needed help. That experience taught me that someone's appearance does not guarantee safety. Dangerous people do not always look physically powerful. They can look old, weak, friendly, confused, or harmless. A person does not need to overpower someone in a fair fight if they can use isolation, surprise, a locked door, or a weapon. The house itself was not the danger. I had grown up in a creepy-looking old place, so I knew appearances could be misleading. But I had gone too far in the other direction. I had told myself not to notice any warning signs because I did not want to be judgmental. There is a difference between unfairly judging someone's home and paying attention when a situation feels wrong. The long drive, isolated location, request to enter, locked door and blocked exit were not only about how the house looked, they were real reasons to be careful. I also realized how vulnerable delivery drivers can be. Customers know someone is coming to their address with food and often cash. The driver usually arrives alone. The customer can choose the location, the lighting, and the time. A driver may be sent to a house far outside the normal area without knowing who is waiting there. The restaurant may have the address, but that does not provide immediate protection. If something happens inside, co-workers may not realize the driver is missing for a long time. People imagine pizza delivery as an easy job, but drivers enter unfamiliar areas every night. They walk to dark doors, apartment buildings, back entrances, hotel rooms, and isolated homes. They have to decide quickly whether a customer is harmless. Most people are. That makes it easier to ignore the few situations that are not. I had thought the job would be fun. I expected strange customers, but I imagined strange in a harmless way. Someone might answer the door wearing a costume, order too much food, or give a bizarre tip. I did not imagine standing in a locked kitchen while an old man blocked the exit and invited me to party. The lie about the timer worked because it gave him a reason to release me without forcing me to openly accuse him. I did not say, "You are making me uncomfortable." I did not threaten to call the police myself. I made the danger seem automatic and outside my control. Even if I wanted to stay, I claimed, the car would summon officers. That allowed him to believe I was not rejecting him personally. It also created urgency. 2.5 minutes was short enough that he could not waste time arguing. The police were supposedly about to receive his exact address. The lie had enough technical detail to sound believable. Delivery companies use tracking systems, and many businesses monitor drivers. An older person who did not understand the technology might easily believe the car had a security feature like that. I am grateful I thought of it. Under fear, people do not always make clever decisions. Some freeze, others become angry or panic. My brain gave me a story at exactly the moment I needed one. Had I hesitated too long, he may have noticed I was lying. Had I made the system sound too complicated, he might have questioned it. Instead, I spoke naturally enough that he accepted it immediately. His reaction was almost comical in another context. An old man who had needed a walker suddenly leaving it behind and rushing to open the door sounds like a scene from a movie. In the moment, it was not funny. It showed me that he was afraid of consequences. He did not want police arriving. He wanted me out as soon as he believed they might come. That told me more than any direct confession could have. I do not know whether I reported the incident in detail afterward. At a minimum, I wished the restaurant would stop delivering to that address or prevent drivers from entering the house. Businesses should have clear rules that protect drivers. Food can be placed near the door or handed to the customer outside. If someone cannot carry it, the driver can wait while another person helps, or place it just inside without walking deeper into the home. No driver should feel pressured to enter because a customer appears old or disabled. Kindness should not require ignoring safety. I had wanted to help. That was the reason I crossed the doorway. I did not want to make an elderly man struggle with a walker and a pizza box. He used that moment, intentionally or not, to place me in a situation where I could not easily leave. Afterward, I became much more careful. If a customer asked me to come inside, I found a reason not to. I could say company policy did not allow it. I could place the food at the entrance. I could call the store if the situation became uncomfortable. I no longer worried as much about appearing rude. A stranger thinking I was unhelpful was better than becoming trapped in another house. The experience also made me understand why people sometimes lie during dangerous situations. Normally, honesty is important, but when someone is blocking your exit, you do not owe them the truth. You can invent a person waiting for you. You can say someone knows your location. You can claim the police are already coming. The goal is not to win an argument or expose the other person. The goal is to get outside safely. My lie did not physically threaten him. It gave him a choice: unlock the door or risk police arriving. He chose the door. I still wonder whether he realized later that there was no timer. Maybe he watched my car leave and waited for police who never came. Perhaps he called the restaurant and complained. Maybe he understood immediately after I left that I had tricked him. None of that mattered once I was back in the car. I was no longer inside his home. The locked door was behind me. I had the road and distance between us. The return drive probably took close to another 50 minutes, but it felt different from the journey there. On the way out, the dark rural roads had seemed inconvenient and slightly creepy. On the way back, they felt like escape routes. Each mile placed more distance between me and the house. I kept expecting to see headlights following behind me, even if there were none. Every vehicle made me check the mirror. I did not fully relax until I reached familiar roads and saw more businesses, traffic, and lights. The restaurant eventually came back into view. According to my lie, reaching the property would have shut off the imaginary alarm. In reality, reaching it made me feel safe because other people were there. I was no longer alone with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. The story could have ended in many ways. The man could have laughed at the timer and refused to move. He could have called my bluff. He could have had someone else waiting near the door. He might have become angry when I tried to leave. Instead, he believed me. He abandoned the walker, hurried to the entrance, unlocked it, and opened the door. That small moment of belief gave me everything I needed. I often think about how quickly the danger developed. When I knocked, I saw an elderly man with a walker. Within a few minutes, I was trapped in his kitchen. Nothing about the beginning looked dramatic. There was no visible weapon. He did not shout. He did not attack me as soon as I entered. He only locked the door, stood in the doorway, and asked a question. That quietness made the situation more unsettling. Danger does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it appears as a favor. Can you bring the pizza inside? Then the door closes. Then the lock turns. Then the person stands between you and the way out. The invitation to party may have sounded harmless to someone hearing only the words. Inside that room, it did not feel harmless. Context changed everything. We were not friends. I had not come there socially. I was working. He had brought me into an isolated house under the excuse that he needed help, then locked me inside before making the invitation. I trusted my fear. I am glad I did. I do not know what his full intention was, and I cannot prove he planned to harm me, but I also do not need proof to believe leaving was the right choice. Waiting until someone clearly attacks you can be too late. The locked door was enough. The blocked doorway was enough. His sudden movement after hearing about police was enough. I delivered pizzas only for a short amount of time because I thought it would be fun. Most of the job was ordinary. This delivery was not. I drove nearly 50 minutes into an area so remote that I did not even know our restaurant served it. I arrived at an old house and met a man who appeared to be in his 60s or 70s. He used a walker and asked me to place the pizza on his table. I felt uncomfortable, but I went inside because he looked old and weak. He closed and locked the door behind me. I pretended not to notice. I placed the pizza in the kitchen while he stood in the doorway and asked whether I wanted to party with him. I told him I would love to, but my delivery car had a 2.5-minute safety timer. I claimed that if I did not return to the vehicle and begin driving, the police would automatically receive my location, and the system would not turn off until I reached the restaurant. The man left his walker where it was. He moved quickly to the front door. He unlocked it and let me out. There was no timer. There was no automatic police call. There was only a frightened delivery driver telling a convincing lie. Thankfully, he believed every word. It happened on Wednesday, August 17th, 1977. It began as an ordinary stop at a convenience store and turned into one of the most frightening moments of my life. I had only stopped to buy a soft drink. There was nothing unusual about the decision. It was the kind of small stop people make without giving it any thought. I expected to park, walk inside, buy the drink, and be back on the road within a few minutes. I was driving a 1973 Chevrolet Caprice at the time. It was a large car, the kind of heavy American vehicle that was common during those years. I had no idea that within minutes I would be hiding underneath it while bullets passed through the parking lot. When I arrived at the convenience store, the building looked normal from the outside. I did not see broken windows, hear an alarm, or notice anyone running away. There was no obvious warning that something dangerous was happening inside. I parked and began walking toward the entrance. As I approached the door, I looked through the glass and immediately knew something was wrong. Several customers were lying on the floor. At first, my mind had trouble understanding what I was seeing. People do not normally lie flat on the floor of a convenience store. For a brief second, I may have wondered whether someone had become sick or whether there had been some kind of accident. Then I saw the man standing at the register. He was wearing a ski mask. He had a pistol in his hand, and the gun was aimed directly at the clerk. The entire situation became clear at once. The store was being robbed. The customers on the floor were not resting or helping someone who had fallen. They had been ordered down by the masked gunman. The clerk stood behind the register with a pistol pointed at him. I could not hear everything being said through the glass, but I did not need to. The weapon, the mask, and the frightened people on the floor explained enough. I stopped moving toward the door. I do not remember deciding to stop. My body simply reacted to the danger before I had time to think about it. The man inside had not yet turned the gun toward me, but I was standing close to the entrance. If he looked up and saw me, he might believe I was trying to interfere or alert someone. I suddenly felt exposed. The glass door provided no real protection. The parking lot behind me was open, and my car was several steps away. I wanted to move, but moving too quickly might attract the gunman's attention. Then I heard the sound of tires squealing. The noise came from behind me. I turned and saw two police cars flying into the parking lot. They entered fast, their tires making sharp sounds against the pavement. It was clear the officers already knew a robbery was happening and were responding as quickly as possible. Until that moment, I had been standing outside the store, looking in at the armed man. Now, police officers had arrived behind me. I was suddenly between the gunman and the police. That was the worst possible place to be. I immediately turned away from the entrance and started heading back toward my car. I did not know whether the masked man had seen the police cars arrive. I did not know whether he planned to surrender, hide, take a hostage, or begin shooting. I only knew I needed to get away from the doorway. I had taken only a few steps when the shooting began. Gunfire is much louder in real life than it sounds on television. There is no background music or warning. One moment there is tension, and the next there is an explosive crack that seems to hit the entire body. Shots were being exchanged between the gunman and the police. I dropped to the ground. There was no time to open the car door and climb inside. Standing upright beside the vehicle would have left most of my body exposed. I threw myself down on the pavement and rolled underneath the Chevrolet. The Caprice was a large car with enough space beneath it for me to get under part of the body. I pressed myself as close to the ground as possible. The pavement was hard against my chest and arms. Dirt, dust, and small stones were beneath me, but I did not care about discomfort. The metal body of the car was now the only protection I had. I could see parts of the parking lot from underneath. My view was low and narrow. I could see tires, shoes, shadows, and movement, but I could not see the entire scene. More shots were fired. Each one sounded close. The gunfire echoed off the store and the cars in the parking lot. I could not always tell whether a shot came from the police or from the masked man. I did not know where the bullets were traveling. I only knew they were moving through the same area where I was hiding. I tried to make myself as flat as possible. There is a strange helplessness in hiding under a car during a gunfight. You cannot see enough to understand what is happening, but you can hear every shot. You know that the metal above you may stop some bullets, but it is not a solid wall. A car door can be penetrated. Bullets can pass under a vehicle or strike the pavement and change direction. I had no guarantee that the car would protect me. Still, it was better than being exposed. I remember the underside of the Chevrolet being only inches above me. The large car that I normally thought of as transportation suddenly felt like a shelter. I tried not to move. I was afraid that if I crawled out on the wrong side, one of the police officers might mistake me for the gunman. I was also afraid the masked man might run into the parking lot and use my car as cover. The customers were still inside the store. The clerk was still near the register. I wondered whether anyone inside had been hit. The people on the floor had almost no control over what was happening. They were trapped inside with an armed robber while police fired from outside. A person who lifted their head at the wrong moment could be caught in the gunfire. I thought about the clerk standing closest to the gunman. He had already had a pistol aimed at him before the police arrived. Once the shooting began, his danger must have become even greater. I did not know whether the masked man was firing from inside the store, through the doorway, or after coming outside. From beneath the car, I could only hear the shots and see pieces of movement. I counted roughly 8 or 9 shots. It is possible there were more or fewer because gunfire happens quickly, and fear can affect memory. But I remember the exchange lasting long enough for me to count several separate shots. Each shot made me tense. After one shot, there might be a brief pause. Then another would come. I kept expecting a bullet to strike the car directly above me. At some point, one did hit the Chevrolet. I did not know it immediately, but a bullet entered the car door. The metal body that was protecting me had been struck during the shootout. That detail became clear later when I saw the hole. While I was underneath the car, I could not tell whether the loud impact I heard was a bullet hitting the Chevrolet, another vehicle, or the pavement. I only knew the gunfire was close enough to damage the car. I thought about how different the situation would have been if I had reached the door seconds earlier. I might have walked directly into the robbery. The gunman could have ordered me onto the floor with the other customers. I could have been standing inside when the police arrived. I might have been trapped between the counter and the entrance during the shooting. Instead, I had noticed what was happening before opening the door. That small delay may have saved my life, but standing outside had also placed me directly in the open when the police arrived. The timing was both fortunate and dangerous. If I had arrived a minute later, the parking lot might already have been blocked. If I had arrived a minute earlier, I might have been inside. I had reached the store at exactly the moment when the robbery was about to turn into a shootout. Under the car, time seemed to slow down. The entire exchange probably lasted only seconds, but it felt much longer. When you are waiting for the next gunshot, every pause feels important. You wonder whether the shooting has ended or whether someone is only reloading. You listen for police officers shouting. You listen for footsteps running toward you. You listen for the store door opening. I was afraid to raise my head. Even after the final shot, I remained under the vehicle. Silence after gunfire does not immediately feel safe. Sometimes the silence is more frightening because you do not know who is still standing. The masked man could have been moving quietly between the cars. An officer could have been injured. The gunman might have been waiting for someone to expose themselves. I stayed down and looked through the narrow space beneath the Chevrolet. Eventually, I saw the man with the ski mask lying on the ground. He had been wounded. From my position, I could not fully see the injury, and I did not know how serious it was. I only saw that he was no longer standing and shooting. The police had stopped him. That was the first moment I believed the immediate danger might be over. Even then, I did not rush out. Police officers involved in a shooting remain alert because they do not know whether there are other suspects. Sudden movement could be misunderstood. I waited until it seemed safe to move and followed whatever instructions were being given. When I finally came out from beneath the car, the parking lot looked completely different from the ordinary place I had entered only minutes before. Police cars were positioned near the store. Officers had their weapons out. The wounded robber was on the ground. The people inside were probably still being checked and questioned. The convenience store that had looked normal from the road had become the scene of a violent crime. I looked at my Chevrolet and found the bullet hole in the door. Seeing it made the danger feel even more real. During the shooting, I had known bullets were passing through the area, but the hole was physical proof of how close one had come. That bullet had struck the car I was hiding under. Depending on its angle, it could have hit me if I had been standing beside the door or trying to climb inside. Had I reached the car a few seconds earlier and opened that door, my body might have been exactly where the bullet passed. Had I hidden on the wrong side, I could have been exposed. The hole remained in the door as a reminder of the robbery and shootout. I continued driving that car for another 3 years. Every time I saw the damage, I remembered the sound of the shots and the feeling of rolling beneath the vehicle. Most people who noticed the hole probably assumed it came from an accident, vandalism, or some strange event. If they asked, I could tell them the truth. The car had been caught in a gunfight outside a convenience store. It was not a story I needed to exaggerate. The bullet hole was there. For 3 years, the Chevrolet carried visible evidence of what had happened. The Caprice became more than an old car to me. It had served as cover when I needed it most. Cars are not designed to protect people from bullets, and I would never claim it was perfect protection. But its size and the space underneath gave me somewhere to hide. Without it, I might have been lying in the open parking lot. The incident changed the way I approached stores and parking lots afterward. Before that day, I had never thought much about looking through the glass before entering a business. I would walk in automatically. Afterward, I paid more attention. I noticed where people were standing. I looked at the cashier. I watched for unusual movement. If everyone inside looked toward the floor or someone stood too close to the register, I became cautious. One experience can change habits for the rest of a person's life. The robbery also taught me how quickly an ordinary day can become dangerous. There was no long build-up. I had not been traveling through a dangerous neighborhood looking for trouble. I only wanted a soft drink. Within seconds, I saw customers on the floor, a masked man with a pistol, and police cars entering at high speed. Then bullets were flying. Life can turn on very small decisions. Stopping at that particular store, arriving at that exact minute, looking through the door before opening it, turning toward the sound of tires, running back to the car, dropping instead of trying to climb inside. Each action affected what happened next. If I had frozen near the entrance, I could have been in the line of fire. If I had tried to run across the parking lot, I would have been exposed. My body chose the nearest protection. I dropped and rolled under the Chevrolet. People sometimes imagine they know how they will react during a shooting. They think they will remain calm, identify the shooter, and make a perfect plan. In reality, there is almost no time. The body acts before the mind can carefully consider every choice. I did not think through the strengths and weaknesses of hiding under a car. I saw the vehicle and moved toward it. Fear pushed me to the ground. Only later could I understand why that decision worked. The police officers also had to make decisions immediately. They arrived while an armed robbery was in progress. The gunman was holding a pistol near innocent people. The officers had to stop him without knowing exactly how many customers were inside or whether another robber was present. The parking lot contained civilian vehicles, including mine. They could not control every direction once shooting started. Gunfights in films often look organized. One side fires, the other side returns fire, and the camera clearly shows where everyone is. Real gunfire is confused. People move. Sound echoes. Objects block the view. Officers must decide whether they have a safe shot, while knowing a delay can allow the gunman to hurt someone. The masked man also made a decision. He could have surrendered when the police arrived. Instead, shots were exchanged. I do not know what he was thinking. Perhaps he believed he could escape. Maybe he panicked and fired without a plan. He may have thought the officers would hesitate because customers were inside. Whatever his reason, his choice turned the robbery into a shooting. He ended up wounded on the ground. The clerk and customers had probably believed the worst danger was the gun pointed at the register. Then the police arrived, and the entire building became part of a shootout. I often wondered what the people inside remembered. From my position outside, I had at least seen the police cars arrive and had a chance to move toward cover. The customers lying on the floor may not have known who was firing or where the bullets were coming from. They could only remain low and hope none of the shots reached them. The clerk was probably trying to make himself as small as possible behind the counter. A convenience store counter may provide some cover, but it is not guaranteed to stop a bullet. Everyone inside had to trust that the police would end the threat without hitting them. Once the shooting stopped, the emotional reaction may not have come immediately. During danger, the body focuses on survival. Afterward, hands begin shaking. Breathing becomes difficult. A person may feel weak or sick. The mind starts replaying the event and noticing details that were ignored during the crisis. For me, one of those details was the bullet hole. It showed that the gunfire had not been distant. The bullet had reached my car. The idea that I could have been hit was not imagination. The path of at least one shot had crossed the place where I had been standing only moments earlier. I may never know who fired that particular bullet. It could have come from the robber or one of the police officers. During an exchange, bullets can miss the intended target and continue until they strike something else. The person pulling the trigger may never have known the round hit my Chevrolet. To me, however, the hole became part of the car's identity. I could have repaired the door, but I continued driving it with the damage. Perhaps fixing it was not a priority, or perhaps part of me saw the hole as a reminder that I had survived. It looked small compared with the fear of the moment, but it carried the whole story. Anyone could place a finger near it and understand that a bullet had passed through the metal. I drove the Caprice for 3 more years. During that time, normal life continued. I went to work, visited people, bought groceries, and drove past countless other stores. Most trips were ordinary. But that damaged door traveled with me. Sometimes I would look at it and return mentally to August 17th, 1977. I would see the customers lying on the floor. I would see the masked man pointing his pistol at the clerk. I would hear the police cars arriving with their tires squealing. I would hear the first shot. I would feel myself hitting the pavement and rolling beneath the car. Memory can return through a single object. For me, it was that door. The incident also changed how I thought about police response. Before then, hearing sirens or seeing police cars speeding past was something happening to someone else. That day, the officers arrived at the exact place where I was standing. Their response ended the robbery, but their arrival also triggered the gunfight. That is not criticism of the police. The gunman was armed and dangerous, and the officers had to act. It simply showed me how dangerous the area around a crime can become when police arrive. An innocent person outside may suddenly be between both sides. After that, I understood why officers tell people to get down, move away, or remain still. In a confused scene, they cannot immediately know who is involved. A person running from the store could be a frightened customer or another suspect. Someone reaching into a car might be trying to hide or retrieve a weapon. Every movement matters. I was fortunate that I reached cover without being mistaken for the robber. The ski mask made the gunman easy to identify, but the situation was still moving quickly. I also learned never to assume that the absence of an alarm means a place is safe. The convenience store appeared normal from outside. If I had been looking down, thinking about the drink I wanted, or reaching for the door without looking inside, I would have walked into the robbery. A few seconds of attention made the difference. The people already inside may not have had that warning. They entered before the gunman revealed the weapon or arrived while the robbery was beginning. Once ordered onto the floor, they had no safe way to leave. I sometimes wondered why the robber chose that store. Maybe he believed it would have cash available and few security measures. Perhaps he had watched the location before. He may have expected to be gone before the police arrived. Something must have alerted law enforcement quickly because the two cars appeared while I was still approaching the entrance. The response was so fast that the gunman did not have time to leave quietly. The squealing tires announced that his escape route was closing. Instead of giving up, he exchanged fire. The entire robbery may have lasted only a short time. For the people involved, it became a permanent memory. The clerk probably returned to the image of the pistol pointing at him. The customers remembered the floor against their bodies and the sound of bullets. The officers remembered firing at the masked man. The gunman carried the physical result of being wounded. I carried the memory and the damaged car door. Violent events connect strangers for a few minutes and then send them back into separate lives. I never knew most of the people inside the store. We had simply planned to buy things from the same place on the same day. Yet we shared an experience that could have ended very differently. I do not know whether the customers ever learned there was someone hiding beneath a Chevrolet in the parking lot. They may have seen my car afterward or noticed the bullet hole. From inside, they may not have known anyone was directly outside when the police arrived. Their entire view of the event came from the floor of the store. Mine came from beneath the car. The robber lying wounded was the first clear sign that the shooting had ended. Until I saw him, I had no way to know whether the police were winning, losing, or still searching for him. Seeing the mask on the man lying on the ground connected him to the person I had seen at the register. The threat was no longer standing. The pistol was no longer aimed at the clerk. That image allowed me to believe I could eventually come out. I still approached the situation carefully. A wounded armed person can remain dangerous, and officers may continue shouting commands after shots stop. I waited until the scene was controlled. When I finally stood up, my clothes were probably dirty from the pavement. My body may have been shaking. The soft drink I had planned to buy no longer mattered. It is strange how quickly a small desire disappears when survival becomes the only concern. Minutes earlier, I had been thinking about walking inside and choosing a drink. Afterward, I was looking at a bullet hole and realizing I could have been killed. That contrast is one reason the story has remained so clear. There was no heroic action on my part. I did not confront the robber. I did not help the police. I did not rescue anyone. I saw the danger and tried to survive it. Sometimes that is the only sensible thing a person can do. Trying to act like a hero could have placed more people in danger. The gunman already had a weapon aimed at the clerk. If I had shouted or entered the store, he might have fired before police arrived. By turning back and seeking cover, I avoided becoming another problem the officers had to manage. I was lucky enough to make the right choice under pressure. Luck played a major role. The Chevrolet was close enough to reach. There was room beneath it. The bullet struck the door rather than traveling underneath. The gunman was wounded before he reached my hiding place. No shot hit me while I moved across the parking lot. A small change in any of those details could have produced another ending. For years after, when I told the story, I could point to the hole in the door. It prevented the event from feeling like a distant dream. The metal had recorded part of what happened. Even as time passed and memory softened around some details, the damage remained. August 17th, 1977, began as an ordinary Wednesday. I stopped at a convenience store to buy a soft drink. As I approached the entrance, I saw customers lying on the floor and a masked man pointing a pistol at the clerk. Then, 2 police cars came flying into the parking lot. I turned toward my Chevrolet, but the shooting started before I could reach safety inside it. I dropped, rolled beneath the car, and stayed there while roughly 8 or 9 shots were exchanged. When the gunfire stopped, I saw the masked man lying wounded on the ground. Later, I found the bullet hole in the car door. I continued driving that 1973 Chevrolet Caprice for another 3 years. The hole stayed with the car, and the memory stayed with me. I had gone to buy a drink. Instead, I ended up under my car while police and an armed robber exchanged gunfire only a short distance away. Every time I looked at that damaged door, I remembered how little space there had been between an ordinary afternoon and death. This happened during wildfire season, when the air outside had been bad for days. Smoke covered the area, the sky looked wrong, and everything smelled faintly burned. Even indoors, the air did not feel completely clean. People were coughing more than usual, windows stayed closed, and everyone kept checking the air quality, because some days were worse than others. I had already been feeling the effects of it. My throat was dry, my head felt heavy, and breathing did not feel as easy or natural as it normally did. I was still going through my normal routine, though. I did not think I was about to have a medical emergency. I just thought the smoke was making me tired and uncomfortable like it was doing to everyone else. That night, I was listening to someone tell a story. It was one of those stories that becomes funnier the longer it goes. I started laughing, then could not stop. It was not a quiet laugh. I was laughing so hard that my stomach hurt and I could barely catch my breath. Normally, that would have been harmless, but the air quality was poor, and I was already having some trouble breathing because of the smoke. Laughing so hard made it even more difficult to pull in enough air. I remember laughing. I remember trying to breathe between laughs. Then, everything stopped. There was no warning where I slowly became dizzy and had time to sit down. I did not feel myself gently losing balance. 1 second I was standing and laughing, and the next second my body simply shut off. I fell straight backward. There was no attempt to protect my head. I did not put my hands out. I did not turn or bend my knees. I dropped like a tree. Timber, the back of my head struck the floor with enough force to leave a knot about the size of a tennis ball. People later told me the sound was terrible. A human head hitting a hard surface has a sound that is difficult to forget. It is heavy and solid. Anyone who hears it immediately knows something serious has happened. The people around me rushed over. At first, they may have thought I had only fainted. People faint for many reasons. They can become light-headed from heat, pain, stress, dehydration, or not getting enough oxygen. Usually, someone who faints begins breathing normally again and wakes within a short time. That was not what happened to me. After I went down, I stopped breathing. According to the people who were there, I did not breathe for nearly 4 minutes. I do not remember any of that. I do not remember hitting the floor. I do not remember people shouting my name. I do not remember anyone checking my breathing or trying to wake me. All of that time is simply gone. The people around me believed I was dead. I understand why they thought that. If someone is unconscious, not responding, and not breathing for several minutes, it looks like death. For them, those minutes must have felt endless. They were looking at someone who had been laughing only seconds earlier. There had been no long illness, no warning, and no time to prepare. One moment I was alive and making noise. The next, I was motionless on the floor. I cannot imagine what it must have felt like for them to watch that happen. People sometimes say that 4 minutes is not very long. Under normal conditions, it can pass quickly. But when someone is not breathing, every second matters. 10 seconds can feel frightening. 30 seconds can feel impossible. Several minutes can feel like an entire lifetime. I eventually started breathing again. I do not know exactly what caused my breathing to stop or why it returned. I can only repeat what the people present told me. My own memory begins when I was being woken up. That is the strange part about losing consciousness. There is no feeling of time passing. I did not experience several dark minutes. I did not feel as though I had been asleep for a long time. One moment I was laughing. The next moment, people were around me, trying to wake me. It was like a piece of film had been cut out. I opened my eyes without understanding why everyone looked so frightened. My head hurt badly. The back of it was already swelling, and I felt confused. People asked what had happened. They wanted to know what I remembered or why I had fainted. The first thing I said was strange. I said, I tried the bottom of the rabbit hole, but there were bunnies everywhere. The people around me did not understand what I meant. At the time, I may not have understood it either. It sounded like nonsense. I had fallen, stopped breathing, and then woken up talking about a rabbit hole and bunnies. But inside my mind, the words made sense. I had a clear memory of being outside in a field. It did not feel like a dream. It felt real. In that memory, I saw a litter of rabbits. They were small and alive, moving around near a hole in the ground. I remember watching them come in and out. I remember petting them and playing with them. The scene felt peaceful. The field was open, and the rabbits were not frightened of me. They allowed me to touch them as if I belonged there. I remember their movement, their bodies, and the way they went back toward the hole. It was not a weak image that appeared later after people told me a story. The memory felt solid. It had the same weight as a real event. The problem is that it never happened. I was never in that field. There were no rabbits. While I was unconscious and not breathing, my body was on the floor surrounded by frightened people. Yet my mind created an experience that felt as real as anything else I remembered. That is what made the event truly frightening for me. The physical part was serious. I had hit my head hard enough to create a huge swelling. I had stopped breathing for several minutes. But the false memory disturbed me in a different way. It made me question what memory actually is. I had always believed that a memory was proof something happened. It might become less clear over time, or small details might change, but the basic event had to be real. After this, I knew that was not always true. My mind had created a place, animals, movement, and physical contact. I remembered petting rabbits that did not exist. I remembered watching them go into a hole I had never visited. There was no difference in feeling between that false experience and a normal memory. That night, after I regained consciousness, I remembered what happened around me. I remember being awake again. I remember people speaking to me. I remember the pain in my head and the frightened looks around the room. The rest of that night is still in my memory. The next day is also clear. I can remember the general events and how I felt. I was sore, confused, and trying to understand what had happened. The knot on the back of my head was enormous. Every time I touched it, I was reminded of how hard I had fallen. People repeated the story to me. They told me how suddenly I went down. They described how long I had not been breathing. They told me what I said when I woke up. I had to learn part of my own experience from other people because I had no memory of it. Then there was the following day, 2 days after the fainting. That day is missing. I do not mean that it is slightly unclear or that I have forgotten a few details. The day is almost completely gone from my mind. Other people told me things I supposedly did and said, but their descriptions do not match the memory I have. I do have some recollection of that day. The problem is that my version is not close to what everyone else says happened. It is like my brain filled the empty space with another story. People would tell me where I had been or what we had spoken about, and I would think they were wrong because I remembered something different. Then several people would agree with one another, and I would be the only person with another version. That is a deeply uncomfortable feeling. Normally, when your memory disagrees with someone else's, you assume one of you has forgotten a detail. But when several people share the same version, and your memory is completely different, you begin to realize your brain may not be giving you the truth. You cannot argue with confidence anymore. You cannot say, I know what happened, because I was there. I was there, but my memory was not reliable. The head injury may have affected how my brain stored events. The lack of breathing may also have played a role. I cannot say exactly what caused which part. What I know is that there is a day in my life that other people remember better than I do. They have a version built from real conversations and events. I have another version that feels real inside my head, but apparently did not happen that way. That is almost more disturbing than having no memory at all. If there were only blank space, I could accept that the day was lost. Instead, my mind gave me something to place there. It created a memory that did not match reality. The rabbit memory was the same kind of thing, but even stranger. At least the false memory from 2 days later may have been built from real places, people, or conversations that became mixed together. The rabbits appeared during the period when I was unconscious and not breathing. There was no real event for my brain to misunderstand. It created everything. The field, the rabbit hole, the litter of bunnies, the feeling of touching them. I still remember it. Even now, knowing it never happened does not erase the memory. I can tell myself it was created by an injured brain, lack of oxygen, a dream, or some other strange process. The explanation does not make the image disappear. The field still exists in my memory. The rabbits still move. I can still imagine reaching down and petting them. That makes me wonder how many memories people carry that are not completely real. Most of the time, we never receive proof that our memory is wrong. We remember an argument, a childhood event, or a conversation and assume our version is correct. Other people may remember it differently, but we trust ourselves. I learned that the mind can produce a complete experience without reality behind it. It can create something detailed enough to survive for years. That realization changed the way I think about consciousness. During those minutes, my body was not breathing. I was not awake or aware of the people around me, but somewhere inside my mind, something was happening. I was not in darkness. I was not watching my body from above. I did not see a bright light, family members, or any of the things people often describe after near-death experiences. I saw rabbits. That sounds almost funny when I say it. Someone stops breathing for nearly 4 minutes, wakes up, and starts talking about bunnies. But it did not feel funny. It felt like I had gone somewhere. I know that does not mean I truly traveled to another place. The brain can create powerful experiences under extreme conditions. Dreams can feel real. A head injury can cause confusion. A lack of oxygen may change what the brain sees or remembers. There may be a completely physical explanation. Still, emotionally, it feels like there is a gap between the last moment of laughter and the moment I woke up. Inside that gap is the rabbit hole. The phrase I said makes it even stranger. I tried the bottom of the rabbit hole, but there were bunnies everywhere. I do not know exactly what "tried the bottom" meant. Maybe I believed I had gone down into the hole. Perhaps I was trying to explain that I reached the end of something and found the rabbits there. The words came out before I had time to create a story or think about what would sound interesting. They were the first thing my confused brain offered when someone asked what happened. That is why I take the memory seriously as an experience, even though I know the field was not real. I did not hear someone mention rabbits afterward and build a false image around it. I spoke about them immediately. The rabbits were already in my mind when I started breathing and woke up. Sometimes I think about the phrase "going down the rabbit hole." Normally it means becoming deeply involved in something strange or confusing. It also brings to mind Alice in Wonderland, where falling down a rabbit hole leads into another world. I had not planned to use that idea, but after what happened, it felt as though I had gone down my own rabbit hole during those minutes without breathing. At the bottom, there was not a frightening place. There were bunnies everywhere. That peaceful image is almost the opposite of what was happening to my body. In the room, people thought I was dying. They were frightened, shouting, and trying to get me to breathe. Inside the memory, I was outside in a field playing with small animals. There was no panic, no pain, no awareness that anything was wrong. The contrast is difficult to understand. Maybe the brain protected me by creating something calm. Maybe it was random. Perhaps rabbits were connected to some forgotten image or thought from earlier. I will probably never know. The physical aftermath was easier to explain. I had fallen and hit my head. The swelling showed exactly where the impact happened. A tennis ball-sized knot is not something you can ignore. It made sleeping uncomfortable, and I had to be careful about touching or resting against it. The memory problems were less visible. From the outside, I was awake and talking. People might have assumed I was recovering normally. Inside, I had gaps and false memories. I was trying to compare what I remembered with what everyone else said. That process was frightening because it showed me how little control I had over my own mind. A broken bone can be seen on an X-ray. A cut can be stitched. But how do you repair trust in your own memory? Every time I failed to remember something, I wondered whether more had been lost. Every time I remembered something clearly, I wondered whether it had happened at all. For a while, I kept mentally checking events. Did someone else remember this? Was there proof? Did I really do that? Or did my brain create it? Most of my memory remained normal, but the missing day and the rabbit field were enough to make me doubt myself. The people around me also had their own trauma from the event. I think sometimes we focus so much on the person who fainted that we forget what witnesses experienced. I had no awareness of the worst part. I did not watch myself fall. I did not see my body stop breathing. I did not spend nearly 4 minutes wondering whether I would survive. The people around me did. They had to carry those minutes in a way I never could. They may have replayed the sound of my head striking the floor. They may have remembered checking for breath and finding none. They saw my face and body while I was completely unresponsive. Then, I suddenly began breathing and woke up talking about rabbits. From their point of view, it must have been terrifying and confusing. I sometimes wonder what they thought when I first spoke. Were they relieved simply because I was talking? Did the words frighten them because they made no sense? Perhaps they thought I had severe brain damage from the fall. Maybe the strange sentence confirmed how hard I had hit my head. They asked what happened, probably hoping I could explain why I collapsed. Instead, I gave them a line about the bottom of a rabbit hole. That is not the answer anyone expects during a medical emergency. Wildfire smoke had been part of the situation from the beginning. The air quality was bad, and breathing had already been affected before I began laughing. Laughing hard can make a person lightheaded even in clean air. You breathe differently, use up air quickly, and sometimes cannot inhale properly between laughs. During wildfire season, my body may already have been struggling. The combination was enough to make me lose consciousness. I cannot say with certainty that the smoke and laughter were the only causes, but they were the clear factors around the event. Since then, I take poor air quality more seriously. Smoke is not only an unpleasant smell or a reason the sky looks strange. It affects the lungs and body. A person can feel mostly normal and still be more vulnerable than they realize. I had been living in that air, probably becoming used to the discomfort. Then one intense moment pushed my body beyond what it could handle. It also made me aware of how dangerous a simple fall can be. People faint every day, and many wake up without serious injury. The danger often comes from where and how they land. I fell straight backward with no protection. If the surface had been different, or if I had struck another object, the result could have been worse. The knot on my head was frightening, but I survived it. I could easily have cracked my skull or suffered a more serious brain injury. The whole event depended on seconds and angles. If I had felt dizzy and sat down, I might have avoided the head injury. If someone had been close enough to catch me, I might not have hit the floor. If my breathing had not returned, the story would have ended there. Instead, I woke up. That is something I still struggle to fully understand. I was laughing, then I was gone, then I was back. There was no feeling of crossing from one state to another. Consciousness simply disappeared and returned. People like to imagine death as a long experience where you understand what is happening. My experience was nothing like that. If I had not started breathing again, my final conscious moment would have been laughter. I would not have known that I had fallen or that people were trying to save me. That thought is both comforting and terrifying. It is comforting because I did not experience fear during the worst moment. It is terrifying because life could end without the mind receiving any warning. One moment you are inside an ordinary story, laughing harder than you should. Then there is nothing. The rabbit memory complicates that idea because, for me, there was not truly nothing. There was a field. There were rabbits. There was the feeling of being somewhere else. But I cannot know whether that happened during the entire period or only in the seconds before I woke. Dreams that seem long can happen in a very short time. My brain may have created the whole scene as consciousness returned. The order may have been completely different from how I remember it. That is the problem with an experience produced by an injured or oxygen-starved brain. The person experiencing it cannot step outside and check the timeline. All I have is the memory and the words I spoke. I do not claim that I visited an afterlife. I do not claim that the rabbits were supernatural. I do not know whether the experience had any meaning beyond what my brain was doing under extreme stress. But I also cannot pretend it felt like an ordinary dream. The memory is too strong. It sits beside real memories in my mind. Even when I remind myself that it never physically happened, part of me remembers it as a place I visited. The missing day 2 days later adds to that feeling. My brain did not simply fail to record reality. It seems to have created another version. That suggests memory is not a perfect camera. It is a story the brain builds. Most of the time, That story is close enough to reality that we trust it. After trauma, injury, or loss of consciousness, the story can become disconnected. It can fill gaps with images, feelings, and events that never occurred. The result may still feel completely true. People told me what actually happened during the missing day, but their version felt less familiar than mine. That is strange, because they were describing reality. My false recollection felt personal and lived. Their true account felt like something I was being told about another person. I had to accept that the person was me. There are parts of our lives we know only because someone else remembers them. Babies learn their early history from parents. People under anesthesia rely on doctors and family to tell them what happened. After my fainting episode, I had to do the same thing. I had to allow other people to become the owners of part of my timeline. They knew what I did during the period my mind could not record correctly. That loss of ownership was unsettling. The event has become a story people can tell now because I survived. Someone can describe how I laughed, fell like a tree, hit my head, stopped breathing, and woke up talking about bunnies. From a distance, parts of it sound almost humorous. The word timber fits the way I dropped. The rabbit statement sounds strange enough to make people laugh nervously. But underneath the unusual details is the fact that I came frighteningly close to not waking up. According to those who were there, I did not breathe for nearly 4 minutes. My body gave no sign that I was coming back. The people around me thought they had watched me die. Then, I returned with a memory from somewhere that did not exist. That is why I consider it one of the scariest things that has ever happened to me. The fear did not happen during the event itself. It came afterward, when I understood what everyone else had seen. It came when I touched the huge knot on my head. It came when I realized an entire day was missing. It came when people corrected memories that felt real to me. And it came when I understood that the rabbits had never been there. Sometimes I still picture the field. The scene is calm. The rabbits move around the hole, going in and out. I reach down and pet them. There is no smoke in the air. There is no hard floor. There is no pain in the back of my head. There are no people shouting at me to breathe. Then I wake up. I do not know whether the rabbit hole was my mind's way of explaining where I had been. Maybe going down the rabbit hole was simply the closest phrase my injured brain could find. Perhaps I felt I had traveled downward or entered some hidden place. Maybe the words were random. Whatever the explanation, they connected the false memory to the real event in a way I cannot ignore. I said it before anyone knew about the rabbits in my mind. I said it as soon as I returned. That sentence became the bridge between the minutes I cannot remember and the strange experience I still can. I tried the bottom of the rabbit hole, but there were bunnies everywhere. I suppose that is where I went, while my body lay on the floor without breathing. Not literally, perhaps, but inside my mind, it is the only place that exists in that missing space. Wildfire smoke and uncontrollable laughter caused me to collapse without warning. I fell straight backward and struck my head hard enough to leave a knot the size of a tennis ball. The people around me say I stopped breathing for almost 4 minutes. I remember none of it. I remember waking up. I remember the rest of that night. I remember the following day. Then the next day is mostly missing, replaced by memories that do not match what everyone else says happened. And underneath all of it, clearer than it should be, is the field full of rabbits. They were never real. I never went there. I never touched them. But I remember them anyway. That is the part that still scares me most.